Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for this week's first off Fedex St Jude Championship. Hopefully you're enjoying this week. I want to do a little mic test because it looks like we're working over there in the corner. Go ahead, get you guys ready for everything out there for moving day. So gonna touch on all of that action as usual, but also gonna mix in some live golf stuff towards the end as well. So whether you're playing some Showdown over there, they do have a few contests up. Not very good contest selection, or over there on the prop side on Prize Picks or Underdog, you're going to have you covered regardless of what you're looking at. So first off, say hi down in the live chat if you guys haven't already. Hopefully you're having a fantastic Friday evening and are ready to talk some golf. We got Michael down there, says, what a day in golf. Looking forward to making some money. Thanks as always for the input and helping and understanding. Well, hopefully you're having a solid start, and appreciate all the kind words, man. Hopefully you're having a solid night, and let's get after it. What's going on, Ross? Homa went full Homa. Yeah, fully expected with all that out of form. What's going on, Storm? Let's have ourselves a great moving day. Absolutely. Let's go ahead, run it back. Today, by the way, ended up being an absolute smash day. Ended up on the Showdown side about a 5x day with our ROI, a 1.25 shot advantage out there towards the morning starters. So if you took my advice, only played the morning guys, you probably went out there and printed in your Showdown lineup. So hopefully you guys took advantage there. And then for the prop side, ended up being a +7 unit day. So anytime you're getting close to that +10 unit mark, it's something that's going to make a big difference with that bankroll out there, and a big payday out there for some of my Patreon subscribers. So hopefully you guys took advantage and are ready to run it back out there for Saturday. Let's start it off with a look at our presenting sponsor for the live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation. They are a source for all your needs with DFS, not just what we're talking about here with golf. So whether you're going to play football in a few weeks, whether you're playing other sports like MMA out there tomorrow, NBA, hockey, they've got you guys covered. They have content creators covering all of those different sports for you, both in terms of player pool, projections, process-based stuff, keeping on top of all the news across those different venues. If you're a well-rounded DFS player, I know some people like myself, right, like to stick to what they're good at, but when I want to go out there and dabble out there in the MMA like I'm going to do tomorrow, I've got to have a source for those projections. So even though I'm not an expert on it, right, going out there doing my own modeling and whatnot, I could still get a little bit of exposure if I have a membership to a site like Ship It Nation. So if you're somebody that likes to play contests across different sort of platforms, they're the perfect sort of site to go out there and check out. Not only are they not going to price gouge you over there, you're also going to get a discount using code Luke10. So Luke10 will give you a 10% discount off any monthly or yearly membership, and definitely something worth checking out if you guys haven't already. So can't say nothing but nice things about that site. And of course, wanted to start it off with our promo and our sponsor for this live stream. But in terms of the action out there for moving day, today, as I mentioned, went really well for our exposure. The morning wave, which would be the first half of players because there weren't really defined waves out there, played to a -2 scoring average. Almost all of your ceiling scores came from the early guys. And then in the afternoon, it's not like it played terribly difficult, but it only played 0.78 under par. So if you don't know, that's a 1.25 shot difference out there between the two waves, which is very significant out there for your lineup. So if you sort this by ceiling score, if we take a look at the players that played well, Denny went off early, Sam Burns, Victor Hovland, of course, was mentioned on the live stream. But a lot of these guys up here were players that I used in my lineups. And I think if I had more Scotty Scheffler, I would have taken down a GPP or two, but you don't have to be perfect to go out there and generate a solid ROI. So that's what it shows you, right? You don't have to have the absolute nuts to still go out there and profit when you lean into the right DFS fundamentals. And if you remember, yesterday was about that weather advantage, ownership, trying to take guys that were diamonds in the rough, and then trying to focus on a lot of those ball strikers. And though tomorrow we're going off in threesomes, we're not going to have that same sort of weather advantage. The other two pillars are going to stand. We're still going to want to play a lot of that game theory edge, take some low-round options, lean into some of the guys with more upside that aren't getting all of that steam, and then also try and incorporate some ball striking stats, right? Guys that are going out there doing it in a sustainable manner to continue that that into moving day. So we'll talk about that. I'll point out a few of my favorite options when we get over there to DFS, but let me show you what we're talking about with the weather. First off, if you haven't heard, right, they're going off in threesomes because of the fact there might be some thunderstorms tomorrow morning. So the timing of that is variable across different weather sites. You can see here on the HRRR model, they think it'll come in around 7, 8 a.m. local time. I've seen forecasts on weather.com say it comes in at like 3, 4 a.m. If so, that'd be great. That'd be well before play. Probably wouldn't have any sort of delay. I also have forecasts over there on, I believe it's AccuWeather, that has thunderstorms throughout the forecast the entire day. So I think there's a chance that we have some sort of weather delay tomorrow, but there could also be no delay at all. And it could just be threesomes for no reason. So I'm glad that the tour at least took some sort of initiative to try and get ahead of this thing. But based on the different variants across the different sites, I don't think we can say definitively when that is going to happen. And because they're going off on threesomes and they only have a 2-hour spread of tee times, any sort of edge would be minimized at most. So I wouldn't be that crazy about it out there in terms of a weather edge. If anything, I guess you could try and take some of the first few groups off, but you're probably looking at like a 0.1, 0.2 shot advantage. And that would be if everything went in your direction. And the only thing I could see, right, if you had some of the very early starters, is that for the first 2 hours of play, it does look relatively calm. But again, that's only like a 0.2 shot advantage right there. So there's not anything that is super actionable out there. I think any sort of delay would completely throw that off, right? If we get to lock and then that thunderstorm runs through and they don't start until actually around noon, well, then everyone would be playing in pretty much the same kind of conditions. So I wouldn't let the weather be a huge pillar in your process for tomorrow, but rather, as I mentioned before, going out there, taking some lower owned players, still trying to find some of those ball striking stats to lean into and using that to guide your process out there for moving day. So speaking of, let me bring up my projections. We'll talk about some of the guys that I'm getting to, not so much that you can use them in your own process. You can choose to do so if you go ahead and agree with any of these plays, but more so to show you what I'm looking for in specific players. And out here for tomorrow, it's going to be a lot of ugly plays. A lot of guys that would normally have missed the cut at this sort of event, right? Like a Rory's +1, even this like -1 from Aubert, and a lot of tour events, he might not even have made the weekend. So we're going to have a lot of super low owned guys that are playing terrible golf that I'm going to be all over out there for Saturday. And it's all because of that projected ownership over here. It's all because of the fact that they're high upside players that are maybe hitting the ball better than we'd expect. So I'll give you the full details when we get to each option. But what you're going to notice about every single player that I'm using, and Fleetwood, I believe, is the highest owned player that we're going to talk about here in the live stream, is every single one is a pivot. Every single one is somebody that is at most about average ownership, if not somebody that I would consider a pivot down there in that range. So the point of this is going to be to show you what I'm looking for in some of those diamonds in the rough. And if you have any players that you want my specific take on, don't be shy at all to go ahead and throw those down in the live chat. So now's the time for that. If you have any specific player questions, also any DFS related questions, now is the time for that. If you're here for props, we'll be touching on those here in probably like 15, 20 minutes after we get through all of this DFS discussion. But before we do our deep dive, let's catch up on chat. What's going on? Karoom says, appreciate me grinding after on a Saturday. Yeah, it's definitely something. Trying to keep this one a little bit quicker because I've got some stuff to get to. But of course, man, wouldn't trade it for anything, right? Want you guys to have all the information that you need. What's going on? Hef says, let's go, Luke. Scotty making a move tomorrow. I would like to see it. Let's go ahead and see it. He's world number 1. I couldn't doubt him, that's for sure. What's going on, Zach? You had a few pieces, but not all of them together. Great call on Hovland. Not sure if it was the wrong move or just bad luck with Denny. Yeah, I don't know if it's the bad move. Honestly, I think Denny was a decent play out there. That injury news probably scared off a lot of people, but if you were looking at the shots gained metrics, and I mean, he mentioned it's been an issue for a few weeks at this point. He's been hitting the ball well. So I tried to point that out last night, but I don't think it's a terrible move to fade him, right? Obviously, an injury concern is a real one, especially when it's tweeted out by a beat reporter and it was confirmed by him today that it is something that he's dealing with. I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. Now, would I have still played him? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that it was a massive mistake. I mean, he could have very easily have shot like +2 and he would have looked like a genius, right? What's going on, Karoom? Going to be a Fleetwood and P-Rod sort of day. I like both of them. So, yeah, we'll talk about Fleetwood for sure. P-Rod's not on my highlighted plays, but I'm going right back to the well. Right there with you on it. And by the way, if you don't know why both are solid plays, it's the ball striking stats. They've been hitting the ever-living shit out of it. We'll talk about that with Fleetwood, but same thing applies to Patrick Rogers. What's going on for Zach said, best place to find the ball striking stats. They're posted for free over there on Data Golf. So Data Golf, I'll just show you right now, actually. So if you've been having trouble finding this on Data Golf, you can go right to their homepage. And this is something they offer free of charge. So you don't even have to have a Scratch membership. I'm not sponsored at all by Data Golf, by the way. So this is just me being completely honest about their site. They have a lot of really cool stuff on here that makes my job and other content creators' job a lot easier. You go down here to live tournament stats. So this is for the PGA down here. And you can sort it by round 2 and click round 1. You click event average, right? It'll average it over the first 2 days. All of that is free, I believe, for every single player in the field. So again, you go to the main page, go to datagolf.com, you scroll down a little bit, and it is right there. Let me bring up our projections and continue with chat real quick. So where were we at? We got Deacon down there. What's going on, Deacon? What's going on? Always good to see you looking for some of that single entry strategy talk. Absolutely. Love to have you down in live chat, man. And yeah, we'll talk about that when we build a lineup or two together. I'll definitely make sure to hook you up there. Siwoo Kim for round 3 is super cheap. He would be a good GPP pivot. He's going to get no ownership because his form is dog shit so far. But yeah, cheap, and he's played really well this year. So like, I think there's crazier things you could do, but mostly in large field GPPs, right? You don't have to get that different. I don't think you have to get that wild for tomorrow unless you're trying to get infinite leverage to the field. And there's definitely spots where you'd like that, like the big, like 20,000 entry contest for tomorrow. What's going on, Brandon? You don't think AM guys would shoot better than the PM? There are no AM guys out there for tomorrow. It's threesomes off of both tees. So there are no waves. There's a 2-hour spread of tee times. So you'd be looking at the first hour of tee times versus the second hour of tee times, right? Their round is going to overlap for 4.5 hours. So yeah, there's not really a weather edge to be had. And a lot of that is because of the tee times, right? Who did too well today? That's a good question. If we take a look at the shots gained metrics, I think it'll give you the best idea of that. And I would say too well, a lot of that is because of the putter, right? McCarthy gained 3.6 strokes putting. He is an elite tier putter, though, so I don't know if that is that out of bounds. Victor Hovland gained 2.8 strokes putting. Matt Fitzpatrick, 2.76. Xander Schauffele, 2.65. Coincidentally, I used Hovland, Fitzpatrick, Xander all in my lineups for today. So it's not like I'm complaining by any means, but they certainly had their ceiling round. You can also look at around the green poppers. So potentially somebody like, that's actually finding an around the green and a putting popper. Somebody like Hovland, he gained around the green and with the flat stick. Christian Bezainhout, same thing. Another guy I used today, by the way. 2 shots gained out there with the flat stick and also about a stroke gained around the green. So those would be some of the guys that maybe played too well, maybe above their head a little bit. But that's a tough question. I can wait till you get there, but we'll be doubling down on Patrick Rogers. I am, Ross. I'll just say it right now. I'm playing him for tomorrow. The shots gained metrics are what you're looking for. So I'll just give you guys what he did for today. Actually, we'll just look at the event averages over the first 2 rounds. So if you take a look at Patrick Rogers, he's gaining 1.25 shots gained approach per round, and he's losing in all the other 3 categories. So there's a good reason why he's even par, why he really hasn't done jack shit over the first few days. But he is giving us breadcrumbs of still that solid iron play. And long-term, that is the weakest part of his shots gained profile. Normally pretty good off the tee. Maybe not the best, but he is above average in both categories. And then an electric putter when he's playing his best golf. So yeah, I'm going back to it. A lot of the shots gained metrics, which are keeping me on him. Today, though, didn't really do me any favors. I think he had like 3-4 birdies on the round, shot even par. Was pretty mediocre stuff. Underdog has been some real bitches, no lie, no doubt. There's a reason why I call him out every live stream. And he said, why do I think there won't be a weather edge? There's threesomes off of both tees. There's no way for there to be a weather edge. They're overlapping for 4.5 hours of their round. The first hour of their tee times, right, is the difference, right? The rest of their round is going to be played in the same sort of conditions. There's no opportunity for a weather edge. Trust me, I would love for there to be a weather edge, but there's absolutely not one. Barry says, what's going on, Luke? Rye for a decent round 2. Yeah, he did have a decent round 2. Let's go for the Henley in round 3. I got to say, I wouldn't be that disappointed with what he did. I wouldn't even call it decent. He had 4 birdies, 1 bogey on the round. That's pretty good stuff. So I would call that a success with your shout out on the live stream yesterday, Barry. And Henley, I like it too. I'm playing him out there in my lineup. So I certainly hope you're right there. And taking your one and done, that was a hell of a pick. And he got you up to second place as of now. That's a decent pick out there. Great form. I couldn't blame you for taking him this week. And how'd I do on props? I had a +7 unit day. So can't complain. Made a little bit over $3,000 doing so. Great call with Victor. He was cooking. Yeah, dude, I woke up. I was half asleep this morning. I'm not an early riser. I stay up till 3 a.m. normally for most days. So I wake up at 8. I don't sleep very much. I wake up at 8 and I'm half asleep for the first 2 hours. I would put my head down, or maybe I'd go do something. I took out the trash early. I groomed my cats, took the brush and that kind of shit, made sure that they were all chill with their fur and shit like that. And I had to go check the leaderboard, and Hovland is -3. I check it again, he's -5. It was quite a trip checking that today. It was a good trip, let's say. Every time I checked it, he was just doing even better. Karoom says you play everyone. Barry says, he has that is exactly what I'm saying. He's been pretty good with his calls on here. He's gotten some guys wrong. Everyone's gonna get stuff wrong, but he's had a lot of good shouts too. So I wouldn't shy away from that. Let's say that much. All right. If you guys have any players you want my take on, just feel free to let me know down in chat. A little Crown and Coke in the cup. Let's get a sip. My mouth is getting dry, and let's talk through some of these plays. Alrighty. So Rory McIlroy at the top end of the board, $10,800. Played like an absolute loser today. And there's a capital L in McIlroy for a reason. I make fun of him all the time for some of the mistakes that he made. And today, a lot of it was mental. Hole number 3, did not lay up out of the woods, tried to sneak a 3-wood draw out of the long rough, and then hit it into the water for his second shot. There were chips that made no sense. He could not buy a putt for his life out there round 2, and he looked pretty lost. So you may say, why the hell would you want to play Rory McIlroy? Well, it's because I know that when he has no incentive to play well, and he has no pressure at all, which will certainly be the case starting at +1 tomorrow, he plays some of his best golf. And he's also going to be essentially unowned because of the start this week. And just like round 2 Showdown, where I told you guys not to overreact to a 1-round sample size, to not go out there and say oh, this guy's God now that he had a good first round, and not to write off guys like Victor Hovland just because they got started a little bit cold. It's the same thing is true after 2 days. An 18-hole sample size, you can certainly say that about, but even a 36-hole sample size, you've got to forgive and forget a little bit. And a player like Rory, that is one of the top 3 players in the world, birdie or better percentage, Showdown scoring, is one of your top players when it comes to ceiling percentage, is a guy that you shouldn't be overlooking at 10% ownership. And just to give you guys a little bit of perspective when it comes to the ownership up top, I've got somebody like Scotty at 40%. I've got somebody like Xander at nearly 2.5 times the ownership of Rory. So if you're looking for a pivot up top, 10% is about as low as you're going to get up there. So I think there's a way to go out there and try and get different up top, which wasn't really the case for round 2 Showdown. Because we hadn't had a whole 36 holes played, people were still taking shots on guys like a Rory, guys like even Colin. It didn't have the best first round. They were still 15, 20% owned. But now that there's a 36 hole sample, there's a much larger spread between guys like Scotty at -9, even like a Xander at -5 versus Rory at +1. Now you're going to see the ownership really start to polarize. And by polarization, I mean you start to see a much bigger spread between the really high-owned guys and the guys that are much lower-owned. And if you know anything about Showdown, a single-round sample size, it is all about the game theory, right? We can look at all the ball striking stats that we want, but the main thing you should be incorporating for rounds 2 and 3 Showdown is going out there and trying to play low-owned diamonds in the rough. And the reason why I like Rory in particular, it is not just because he's going out there and he's low-owned. He's also hit the ball decently well over the first few days. Round 1 gained 1.95 strokes on approach, lost 0.73 strokes with a putter. Today was it was a loser across all 4 categories, but his approach play was negatively impacted by 2 shots in particular. He lost 1.6 strokes on approach out there on hole number 3, and he also lost 1.2 strokes out there on hole number 16, which coincidentally, guys, are the 2 par 5s, right? The holes that Rory McIlroy is used to going out there and gaining at least like a half a stroke approach per round. He lost a combined nearly 3 strokes on those 2 holes. One would think that there's a good chance that he could get some regression there and that he's probably going to have a much better day with his iron. So he got very unlucky. It was a lot of compounding errors out there in round 2. And what it's giving us is a pretty decent buy low spot out there on Rory McIlroy. I'm taking Tommy Fleetwood as well. He's playing much better. He's also a little bit higher owned than what we have with Rory, but you're also getting a guy in a little bit of better form. So to give you an idea of some of the shots gained metrics with Tommy Fleetwood, over the first 2 days, he is in the top 5 of shots gained approach, gaining 1.83 shots gained approach per round. So that is elite level stuff. He's actually losing about 1.8 shots gained putting per round, which is the complete opposite of what we had at the Olympics. He was the best putter in that field for at least the first 54 holes. Tailed off a little bit on Sunday. That's why he didn't end up winning the gold, but still a very respectable performance. So now that he's still got the iron play, tee to green play in general has been very sharp for Tommy Fleetwood. Maybe we can get that ceiling performance with the putter. It's still a huge maybe, right? There are no sure things out here in PGA DFS, but what I do know is that he's about average ownership in this range, a lot because Hideki is just taking away so much of that ownership right there that he's actually a good play out there for round 3 showdown, right? Like normally a guy that's -4 in the picture is coming in with great form would be like 20% owned out there in GPPs, maybe even a little bit over 20% owned out there tomorrow. You've got these elite guys up top that are still getting a little bit of ownership, particularly Scotty at like 40% ownership. You've still got Hideki down here. I've got is about 26% projected owned. It's taken away and it's making him a much more realistic option. So that's why I'm playing Fleetwood. Shots gained profile is perfect out there for some regression, and that's why I'm getting to him. Next up, we got Love to Go Bear at $9,300. Another guy that's been a little bit sketchy with the form over the first few days, but we don't want to overreact to that. He's still one of the best players in this field. He's much cheaper than he should be, in my opinion, at $9,300. It can easily be your second man into lineups. For main slate, you probably had to use him as either a really, really expensive second man in or probably a first man in for a lot of your builds. And now he fits into a completely different roster construction spot. So $10,500. Sorry, not 10.5% projected ownership. My bad there. Out there for tomorrow. I think that's very reasonable. I think he has a lot more upside than other players in this range. You can say a lot of the same things about Cantlay, right? Also going to be relatively overlooked out there in GPPs, and is another player that people loved heading into this week. He had solid form around here. The form lately had been a lot better than what we had for the rest of 2024. And now he's going to be like 12% owned out there for tomorrow. I still like a Russell Henley. I know somebody mentioned him down there in chat before, but he's going to be higher owned than both of those sort of players. So in comparison, right, I prefer an O'Bear or a Cantlay, even though I love the course fit for Russell Henley. Cantlay, O'Bear are much better players than Russell Henley. So when you're telling me I can spend up $100, maybe $200 and get those kind of talent levels, I'll take them at lower ownership. So that's what I prefer over there in the 9K range. And hopefully it gives you an idea of some of the spend ups that I'm taking. We'll catch up on chat, and then we'll talk about some of these mid to lower tier options. What is the address to my site? So if you're looking for my projections, the Patreon is the way to get there. That's how you can download everything you see on this spreadsheet here. And that is in the description of the video. So my Patreon is what you want to join. I used to have a website up where I had a blog on there, some additional fantasy tools and whatnot. That was discontinued a while ago, but the Patreon is the place to be. Make sure to check that out. Underdog has Hideki at 68. I actually don't think that's a terrible projection, but yeah, maybe an under on that. Playing the $100 single entry, do I think Rory is a good spend up? Yeah, I'd use him in that kind of format, right? He's not like he's a slapdick that you're taking as a pivot. He's a legit stud who's played really well at TPC Southwind that you're getting at like 10% ownership. And I think in single entries, people are going to be scared, right? They play with scared money when they're spending more in GPPs. When you especially get to like the 333 or even like $500 single entries, then you really get people playing a lot of chalk. So I think in even the $100 are going to see that same kind of effect where Scotty's probably going to be like 50% owned out there in that contest. And Rory might be single digit owned out there in GPPs. After today, Rory can only go up. That is absolutely true. I almost took him out there in some prop slips and hopefully, I should say, luckily avoided it. He was, who else was it? Sanjay I was going to take. There were a lot of PM slips that I was so close to taking and posting on my Patreon that I held off on. I think all of them would have lost. So my intuition, my gut was really good today, kept us on the right exposure, and I'm definitely glad for it. How fun was it listening to the announcers talking about the low scoring, knowing it was going to shift? Oh, it's always like that, man. And dude, I see it in like betting discords all the time. I'll have some like numbnuts people in my Discord even that should know better because I tell them ahead of time what's going to happen. It'll be like, what's with all the low scores? PM Wave is going to smash. And then they go out there and it's like a whole stroke harder. It's great, dude. Especially the announcers. A lot of them are pretty casual as well. They won't check the forecast. They won't really know what's coming. It's great. I think one of the guys was like, oh, one of these PM guys is going to shoot a 59. And he was talking about Rory Moore Cobble following that group. That group could hardly hit a green regulation out there in the afternoon. So yeah, dude, it's a story as long as time. And it's not always like the announcers that are the worst. Sometimes it's like Twitter or Discord people that do it even worse. But like, yeah, it's funny. It's great. Anybody get a Discord link? Yes, send me a message on Patreon, Dylan, and I will hook you out there. I'll check it out after the live stream. I'll make sure to check my messages for you. What's going on, Michael? Saturday being moving day means easier pins and setup. Do I think it'll play tougher than it did today? I do not. So I think you're spot on with what you said there. I'll mention that when we get to the prop section, but I think it'll play a little bit easier. Not so much because of the weather, but as you said, from the setup perspective. Mark said you're waiting for the lines to shift a full 1 to 2 strokes lower and then hammer the overs. How they profitable? That's the way to do it, right? If you know that weather's going to shift, then that's the way to take advantage. I think that was a really sharp take, by the way. All right, let's talk about a few other players on here. So we talked about some of my spend ups. Let's go mid-tier, and then we're going to go with some value plays. So for the mid-tier options, I want to point out, they're both relatively low owned. So it's a Sun GM at $8,500, and it'll be Wyndham Clark at $7,900. Neither one has played particularly well to this point. I mean, -1, even -3 for Wyndham Clark is pedestrian for a player of his caliber. But what you get with both players are guys that make a shit ton of birdies. They're some of the best putters on tour. You've seen that this course can be a little bit of, I hate to say it, but a putting contest when it plays as easy as it does, like it did for round 2. And round 3 with the moving day pins, I think it's going to be a lot of what we saw for today. So somebody like Sanjay that can get nuclear hot with the putter, Wyndham Clark, I don't even have to tell you how hot that guy's putter can get. You see that guy making 8-9 birdies in a round all the time out there. Wyndham Clark, by the way, if you're playing Showdown, you play him every single slate. And I'm not kidding on this, by the way, guys. If Wyndham Clark is lower than average owned, you play him every single time that he's teeing it up. Not for main slate. I'm not telling you to lock him or play him out there and like main slate every single time. But for an 18-hole sample size, if he's not over like 10-15% ownership, he's going to have more ceiling equity than what his ownership is going to be. His ceiling round potential, I mean, I've run the numbers. I've taken a look at this before. It's over 20% of his rounds would be classified as a ceiling round. Now, his floor score is also much higher than the PGA Tour average. Normally, people have floor rounds like 8 to maybe 12.5% of the time. He has a floor round like 20% of the time as well. But if you're playing big field contests, large field GPPs, you're not worrying about that. You should not care about a dud performance, right? You're much more, worried about trying to find those guys that pop off. And he does it more than any other player out there. Sun GM, he's not quite as extreme of an example as a Wyndham Clark, but he fits that same kind of description. Gets nuclear hot in a hurry, and he doesn't have his best stuff a lot of time. He'll eject. And like I said with Victor Hovland, right? Victor Hovland, I mentioned he's the sort of player that'll be playing shitty, randomly figure it out, and then shoot -7. Now, you saw that today, right? He shook it off, went out there, and went nuclear low. Sun GM, guys like Wyndham Clark are that same sort of player. They're sporadic. You will see them have a lot of good rounds and then back it up with something well over par and vice versa. So you're hoping for some of that positive regression. You're hoping for them to go out there, kind of figure it out a little bit for moving day. But I would rather take a talented, high upside player like a Sun GM or a Wyndham Clark than some of these other chalky guys in this range. Like a Sam Burns, I love you this week, right? I played him in a ton of lineups. Course history, Bermuda grass, putter. I mean, we talked about it on Wednesday, right? Hopefully a lot of you guys played him as well. But for Showdown, no thank you when he's going to be like 20% plus owned. Victor Hovland, love what you did for us today. But now that he's going to be like 17, 18% owned, like no thank you when we have guys like Sanjay at 11%. You could say the same thing about a Billy Ho. I bet him this week. Love the way that he's played the first few days, but no thank you on Showdown when he's going to be double the ownership of some of the other pivots in this range. So that's the take on round 3 Showdown. It's the take out there for round 2 as well. We're rinsing and repeating that, right? Game theory should be your main angle out there in your lineups. And if you're playing a bunch of chalk, I think you're doing it wrong out there for your exposure. The last mid-tier option we'll talk about before we catch up on chat, any mid-tier guys you wanted me to point out, and then going down to some of our value options down low, is Sepp Straka at $7,700. I've got him at 5.8% projected ownership, so one of the true pivots that you can go out there and include. An elite course history guy, right? Finished runner-up out there to Will Zalatoris when he won that a few years ago, is coming in with decent iron form, a much better putter on Bermuda grass than what we've seen lately. And it's not like he's played horrible. I mean, -2 is just about a stroke lost to the field over the first few rounds. Actually, probably like a stroke and a half lost to the round over the first few rounds. People are treating him like he's played absolute dog shit golf. And if you take a look at the shots gained metrics, just like a lot of the other guys that we've pointed out, I think there's a lot of reason to think that he can turn it around. So to give you some perspective, Sepp Straka is gaining both off the tee and approach to this point, but has lost about a stroke per round when it comes to his around the green play, and is also a loser out there with his putter. So, he's got to get the short game to cooperate for round 3, but the ball striking stats, going out there with your approach and off the tee play, has been relatively sustainable over the first few days. So I'm going to take a low-owned pivot. I don't think you should be doing it blindly. Like, I think high upside plays like a Wyndham Clark, a Sanjay make quite a bit of sense. Like I said, neither one has played particularly well, so a little bit more risk with those sort of options. But a guy like Sepp Straka that's been hitting the ball a lot better than his score is, I think, a no-brainer play to go out there and get to at some low ownership. Let's catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. If not, we'll talk about our value plays. Where are we at? I keep referring to shots gained. Is that different from strokes gained? It's the same thing. It's just a different way to say the same thing, right? A stroke, a shot is the same thing out there in the PGA Tour. So it's like saying tomato, right? It's the same exact thing, man. Mark says, you feel like I'm expecting some low scores from my tone? Absolutely. This golf course lets up a lot of like 6-7 under par rounds, and you want to see somebody going out there and making a lot of birdies. So just like days 1 and 2, I think we're going to see a lot of low ones out there. Any hope for your boy Spieth? Probably not, Phil. He's been lost for a while. I tried to warn you guys on Wednesday that he looked pretty lost. And like I said, I love Spieth. He's one of my favorite. Actually, he's my favorite player out there in the world. But I wouldn't expect it to turn around. Now, could he? Absolutely. He is certainly an or he could sort of candidate. Even when he's been playing really shoddy golf lately, he has made a lot of birdies. So I don't think it's out of question for him to have an 18-hole score. But if you're talking about like single entry counting on that sort of performance, absolutely not, right? He's playing dog shit golf for a reason. It's the same thing with Max Homa. Like, could he go out there and have himself a day? Sure, right? And I could also go down and dunk tomorrow out there on the 10-foot hoop somehow, but it's probably not going to happen, right? So we'll leave it at that, right? It's got a low chance to hit, but he at least does have a chance. Let's talk about some of these cheaper plays in the pool. So I'm playing Max Grazerman. Round 1 was horrendous for Max. He's not going to cash the outright that I took on him. In fact, in large field GPPs, he's probably not going to be close to optimal this week. But in Showdown, he showed us a lot of upside or a lot of promise out here in round 2. He gained 3 strokes on approach out there, could not buy a putt for his life. And now he's completely out of it, right? So now he doesn't have to worry about all that pressure. He's still hitting the ball well, like you saw out there on Friday. And maybe he can continue that sort of ball striking form and try and just make a few more putts, right? Get a few to drop rather than lipping out like he had today. And it could be a much better score out there. And for our case, a much better fantasy score out there in our lineup. So I like him at 2.4% ownership. That's the other huge part about playing somebody like Razorman is that form looks horrible, right? +3 over the first few days, but hit the ball up better than most people would know for today, and is also essentially unowned out there in GPPs. I'm also taking Alex Noren at $6,900. He's also super low owned at only about 5.4%. And over the first few days is gaining with his ball striking stats. So to give you an idea of exactly what he's done, Alex Noren is gaining 0.98 strokes approach per round, is losing a little off the tee, which is worrisome, but a lot of that has been because of water balls, especially during round one. And then his putting stats, which normally Alex Noren, one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, he's losing about a half a stroke putting per round. So if anyone would go out there, get a little bit of regression with the flat stick, it's probably an Alex Noren. And because the approach form has been there, I think there's some upside at just 5% ownership. And then the last play that we're going to point out is a $6,600 Minwoo Lee, which I think is a very, very reasonable price tag. In fact, he's probably at least $600, $700 too cheap out there in the Showdown format. I've got him at 5% ownership, so not a lot of people getting exposure there. And surprisingly, has been gaining with the irons this week, which kind of like a Patrick Rogers, if there's any one category that can be a little bit sketchy for Minwoo Lee, it's normally that iron play. So the fact that he's been strong with that over the first few days, in fact, let me give you the exact numbers with Minwoo ever since Thursday. So he's gaining about a half a stroke approach per round. He's gaining a stroke off the tee, which is exactly what you'd expect to see from Minwoo off the tee, but doing really solid with the iron play and losing with both the short game categories. He's one of the best around the green players that you have on the world, let alone out here on the PGA Tour. And then that putter can be extremely streaky for him. So he's got to get that to flip. That's going to be the huge X factor that unlocks a low round for him. If he can go out there and gain strokes with the putter, he has a -4, -5 round in him. So he's -2. It's not like he's playing terrible golf to this point, but just like the 7, 8K range chalk, it's all the guys that are playing super well. So a Nick Dunlop is over twice the ownership of a Minwoo, a Will Zalatoris, even like an EVR, Chris Kirk at -6, are all going to be about double the ownership of Minwoo. And low key, Minwoo makes more birdies than all of these other players and is also still hitting the ball relatively well. So I'll take the guy for a bounce back, somebody that is due for a little bit of regression. Whereas the guys that are out there at -6 to -8, a lot of them are playing over their head, right? They've had really good short games over their first few days. A few of them will continue that. Those will be the guys that get into contention, but a vast majority of them, maybe even over half of them, are going to go out there and falter a little bit, right? Regress back to their mean, whereas somebody like Minwoo, I think, is going to go in the opposite direction. So that's why I like him over some of the chalky options, just as a play out there for tomorrow. And then when you incorporate the ownership, the fact that Minwoo is also going to be overlooked and a very solid leverage option, that's why I think he's an even better play as well. So those are a few of the cheaper plays that I'm getting to. Now let's talk about some lineup construction stuff, and then we'll cycle over to the prop side. So where are we at? Let me bring up our internet browser. We'll head over to Draftkings, and we'll build a lineup together so I can give you guys an idea on my thought process. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to build for the large field GPP so I can show you guys what I'm looking for out there in my lineups. And because I'm being so contrarian out there in my builds, round 4 will be a little bit more interesting from this segment, as we'll have to think a lot more about our product ownership. But because I'm taking guys like Rory up top, I mean, even like my high-owned guys are like a 15% owned Tommy Fleetwood, I can essentially just play my player pool, right? I can go onto my optimizer, just enter my guys that I want to use, set some max exposures, and I could run my lineups, and I would be totally fine. Now, that's not interesting, right? We're still going to build a lineup here together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to deviate from my actual player pool. So I'm going to take chalky guys that I'm not actually playing myself, just to show you what you would have to think about if you were building a little bit chalkier, which again, this is a lineup that I would never get to. In fact, at least like 3 of the guys in this lineup are guys that I'm not going to play for tomorrow, but I do want to show you how you would navigate that kind of build. In terms of a spend up, I think that Xander Schauffele at like 20% is definitely going to get some ownership there. If you wanted to take, let's say, like a Hideki as your second man in, which I guess would make sense starting with the Xander Schauffele up top. Your third man in, let's say that you really like Sam Burns for tomorrow. So if you went with this kind of start, I mean, you got somebody tied for first, third, and then a Xander at like 20%. This is a really chalky start. And I'm not playing any of these players out there for tomorrow. So I just want to be fully transparent, right? I'm not using any of these chalk donkeys out here for round 3. But if you wanted to, you could make it work. I don't want to tell you that you're a complete donkey for doing so, because as long as you take the right guys down low, you can make this kind of lineup construction work. So if you wanted to throw in a Minwoo here, I think he would make a lot of sense, both in terms of salary and trying to get a little bit different. You could go up a little bit further. Maybe you throw in Grazerman right at like 2% ownership. Even though you have a 20% owned Schauffele, 25% on Hideki, hell, close to 20% out there on Sam Burns. You've got a 5% Lee, a sub 5% Grazerman. And if your last man in here is, I mean, even an Alex Noren would work, right? He's going to be like 5-6% owned, leaving about $100 on the table. You could enter this in the large field GBP and just be fine. The thing you need to avoid, right, if you're starting a little bit chalkier up top, would be starting with like some chalky guys down low. So like, you know, it's not like I hate somebody like Benny Ann or a Straka, but they're a little bit higher owned than some of the other guys in that range. It's not like I hate a Shane Lowry for tomorrow, or even a Wyndham Clark. I think would be a good example of that sort of play. Obviously, like Wyndham, I'm playing him in some lineups. I might not take him with these 3 players up top, because now you're adding another 10%er, right? Now you've only got 2 spots to really get that leverage to the field, which can be a little bit tough out there. So that's why I avoid the chalk up top. It's why I'm so leverage heavy out there in my lineups. First off, because placement points don't matter out there for round 3, but also because it puts you into some precarious positions out there when building your lineups. And if there's anything to remember out there in large field GPPs, is that duplication and lack of leverage are the worst things that you can possibly do in going with your builds. Now, if I was in a single entry, I might be a little bit more willing to take on some chalk. So in like a single entry build, I know somebody asked about that a little bit earlier, so I do want to cover that here. If you started with the Scotty, but then you used like Sanjay as your second man in, that's going to offset a lot of that ownership. You know, Scotty might be like 50% owned, but Sanjay is going to be like sub 10% in a lot of those single entry contests. Your third man in, you could probably still take a Wyndham Clark. You're in the kind of build where you don't have to be as different out there in the single entry kind of contest. So I'm not going to be as worried about ownership and rather just trying to find some of the best plays. Right, a Grazerman is a really risky option. That's where maybe I pivot a little bit and take a Keegan Bradley, right? Somebody playing a little bit more consistent golf. Still looks really good out there with the shots gained metrics. And it's not like he's mega chalky, but you can take on slightly higher ownership numbers. Same thing down in this range. Maybe you would take a Tom Hoagie, who's also like 7-8% owned. You're not as worried about ownership here, right? You just want to take guys that you think are going to play well. And that's how the lineup construction and thought process changes a little bit out there from GPP to single entries. I'm not as fixated on trying to get that leverage and more so just trying to click some of my favorite plays in here. So as a last minute, I think you could really take whoever you wanted to down here. Personally, my favorite play is still Minwoo Lee down there at 6,600. But even if you wanted to take a slightly chalkier Harris English, for example, down there at $6,700, this kind of lineup would be just fine out there in single entries. So in single entries, by the way, the reason why you can take on more ownership is you're trying to beat less people. You don't need as much leverage to the field. You have a much lower chance of duplicating yourself because there's less lineups to compete against, and you're more okay with like a top 5, top 10 finish. It's not like a GPP where the payouts are so top heavy, where it's all about trying to finish in bank first place. So that's why the thought process, has to be tinkered just a little bit for some of those smaller field contests. But that's really all you have to do, right? Is I think in large field GPPs, you better be worried about the ownership, product ownership, all of that. Single entries, it's about just taking the guys you really like. I know it sounds simple, but it really is that simple out there in single entries. You play the best plays. You don't go absolutely batshit insane with the chalk, right? I'm not saying to do that, but you can also take on slightly higher ownership numbers. So that's what I would say out there. Hopefully it helps you out there in the single entries. The guy that asked about that before. And that's all we've got out there for the round 3 Showdown slate. So if you were just here for Showdown, go ahead, smash that like button. Meant to mention that before. Go ahead and do so if you guys haven't already. And also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss what we're doing for round 4 as well. We're still going to talk about props, so still have at least like probably 20, 30 minutes here on live stream. We're going to talk about some of the prop exposure on Underdog and Prize Picks. But if you guys were just here for the Draftkings stuff, still appreciate you guys. Still love you guys stopping by as per usual. Just show some love to the live stream before you hop on out of here. And best of luck out there with your lineups for tomorrow. But still some stuff that we need to get to. Where are we at? A few drinks. Only one so far, Mark. But afterwards, I'm heading out for a little bit, out for dinner with the boys. So they've started a little bit, like I said, like 1.5 drinks in, but they will certainly be flowing later on. That's for sure. Cantlay airmailed 2 greens from 125 and 130. He had his under, but he pulled it off in the back 9. Yeah, that's crazy. I saw his score through like 4 or 5 holes, and believe it or not, Michael, he was one of the few guys I was thinking about taking an under on for the afternoon. So I'm glad that I didn't have to sweat that out, but glad that he pulled through for you. I called the heck out of Hovland for today's Showdown. You're a believer. Yeah, dude, let's run it back. Obviously, not everyone went out there and had that kind of round, but it was nice to have -7. Got a coffee going right now. That's normally me, Michael. I'm normally a coffee guy here on stream. I don't have much Crown and Cokes. I used to drink a little bit more, especially like college age, right? I'm 28 now, by the way. I don't know if everyone knows my age, but I'm 28 years old. I've kind of grown out of it a little bit. I think when you start to get close to 30, you kind of get over that whole thing. Now it's just like when we're going out with the boys, right? Like we go out in town, we go to the bars, we're chilling, like we'll have a good time every once in a while. But outside of that, there's no more. There's no more like random nights out to the bars, like just going meeting friends out of nowhere. It's just like, unless it's planned ahead of time. I know it's kind of lame, right, to say at 28, but I'm getting to that point of life now, unfortunately. I feel older than I actually am. I know some of you out there are rolling your eyes probably that are older than me, but it's true. I'm getting to that point where it's like that shit just it's boring now. It doesn't hit the same, right? Speaking of, I got to get a sip now. What's going on, Michael? Any thoughts on Day? He did decent today. So I didn't have any thoughts on him until now, Phil. And let's take a look at the stats. So I think the stats will really tell the story for Jason Day. He's gaining off the tee at the very least. Round 2, so let's take a look at what you're looking at. Round 2 was much better with the ball striking. So I like that kind of momentum. I don't know if he's my favorite play, but he's certainly an option. He's going to be low owned out there in GPPs, sub 10% for sure. And I think that this round 2 performance could be something to lean into for sure. Like going out there with the ball striking, that's not something we always see from Jason Day. And that putter's normally been electric. So hopefully he can figure that out. What's going on, C. Gianni? Thanks for the great content. Let's go, Rose. Yeah, I was thinking about you today, C. Gianni, when because I remembered you took him for the win this week, right? And he went out there and had another good day. And I was looking at the stats too. And I knew you were going to come by the live streams. I wanted to point this out. Look at how he's hitting the ball. So if you take a look at the first 2 rounds, he's gaining in every category but the putter, and he's been putting lights out recently. So if there's a piece of chalk to play for round 3, I don't believe I'm playing Justin Rose, but you can make a really good argument for playing Justin Rose with the shots gained metrics. So I think you're on to something there, man. I didn't see that coming. I just want to say that much. I certainly didn't think he was going to have that kind of week, and he is so far. Deacon says, thanks, Luke. Appreciate the single entry talk. Of course. Best of luck out there tomorrow. You're new to golf this year, but you love it. What is my live schedule for NFL? So yeah, NFL is going to be a little bit different this year. So I'm going to be doing Showdown content for Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football every single week. Sunday Night Football is going to be a little bit more in flux. And then what I'm going to do for main slate is going to be at least 1 video every single week, if not 2. So I'm still trying to actually formulate the exact schedule. I'll have that for you guys here at some point. But the live streams will be the night of. So for example, like if it's a Thursday Night Football live stream for Showdown, I'll be going live at probably like 5-6 p.m. Eastern time. The Monday Night Football live stream, probably that same kind of thing, like 5-6 p.m. The Sunday night ones are a little bit more in flux because Sunday time is normally family time for me. That's like the one day I don't have to do content for golf, right? I don't do an early look ahead on Sundays normally. There's no live streams I normally do then. So I try and make Sundays a family day, but when I'm not doing that, a lot of times I will do a Sunday live stream. So those are it for the Showdown stuff. The main slate, we'll probably be doing stuff Sunday mornings. I say probably because I haven't put that in my schedule quite yet, but that was something we did last year and probably will be again. Where am I located? I'm down in Florida. So Delray Beach, Boca Raton area. And you don't go out as much anymore. Yeah, if you have a fiance, house, and all that, that definitely contributes to that. I have 2 cats. Speaking of, my cat's sitting at the door, one's out right now, so she'll have to deal with it here for a few minutes. But yeah, that definitely doesn't help as well with the whole going out thing, right? All right, let's talk about some prop stuff. So for round 3, I think we're going to see similar scoring averages to round 2. And though, actually, I'll just share this so you guys can see the averages yourself. Here's what we had for round 2. So this will be at both events. We're going to talk about Live Golf here in just a little bit. But you can see the St. Jude stuff up there in the top left. So stroke average was minus 1.39. See the birdie average just over 4 per round. Bogey average didn't go up nearly as much as what I thought. Was about 2.5 per round. And then the fairways hit and green and regulation averages went ever so slightly down. So everything was pretty predictable. I think the one real difference in the averages from what I was expecting is I thought the bogey average might be like 2.6, 2.75 per round. A few guys yesterday that we took ended up hooking at 2 out of 2.5 bogeys. And a lot of that was probably because of the course conditions. The pin locations were certainly set up a lot easier for round 2 than what we were expecting. And that was definitely, like I said, a little bit surprising, but actually played to our advantage in a lot of the other props that we took. So those are the averages from today. Let me circle back over here to Underdog now so we can try and find some of that exposure. The reason why, by the way, I think it'll play pretty similar out there tomorrow is that if we take a look at the forecast over here, they're calling for pretty much the same kind of winds. It's like 9 to 11 miles an hour of sustained, a little bit gusty out there towards the afternoon. So I don't think it'll be a distinguishable difference out there from what we had today. So taking a look at this board, 69 strokes, 67.5 for some players. It's definitely a little bit lower than what we had for round 2, which you would expect after the easier conditions, but I don't necessarily disagree with. Let's see what we have over here on Prize Picks. So it looks like a lot of the same. So in terms of like differences, like maybe Hideki's 0.5 higher over there on the Underdog side. Same thing with like Tony Finaudo. He was 68.5. Not sure on Tom Kim. Let's check that one out. So where's Tom Kim, the GOAT? He's also up there at 68.5. So if you think it's going to play easy tomorrow, which I think would be a fair assumption, moving day pins, golf course that's playing pretty soft, the place to play would likely be Underdog because you're getting slightly higher lines, slightly easier projections to hit, and the payout structure is going to be rather similar. So I would say my favorite board, again, I haven't fully deep dived these at all, right? I'm just like looking at the projections and reacting right off the bat, would be that Underdog is probably my favorite spot to play. And when I want to look at some of the birdie lines now, so these are definitely a lot higher than what they had for round 2. In fact, they pretty much have everyone at 4.5. I'm going to assume that Prize Picks has guys lower. So 4.5 for your elite tier players, but you can see over here on Prize Picks that the birdies are lower than what they have there in Underdog. So a little bit of conflicting boards over here, right? Like Underdog has the birdies higher, but also the strokes lines higher, whereas Prize Picks has the strokes lines a little bit lower, and then also those birdie lines a little bit lower. So if you were going to take overs on birdies, the spot to do it would obviously be over here on Prize Picks, whereas if you're going to take unders on strokes, the strategy is to go over here on Underdog and do so. So I think that that's probably how I'm going to approach this kind of slate, especially because we're going to have these live golf props to look at too. So before we actually make a slip here together, we're going to talk about live golf because part of the reason why we had such a good day is that if you mix in live and PGA, you can get full payout cards, even if you're, taking 2 fades together, right? Or 2 unders on strokes, because you're mixing in 2 separate golf tournaments, you get a much better payout structure. So what I'm going to show you guys now is we'll circle back to that average sheet to show you guys some of the stats from today to go over the live golf stuff, because again, I think this is going to be pretty valuable. So stroke average was 2.26 under par. Birdie average was 4.1 per round. So I know this doesn't look that crazy, but the first about half an hour of play was in really high winds, also an absolute downpour on live. So a lot of people that didn't watch it, which is probably like 90% of your bettors, hell, probably even the lines makers didn't watch the golf early this morning. I guess early afternoon at like 1 p.m. is when that happened. But the early guys got screwed. Like you had guys making double, triple bogeys out there. And in reality, the stroke average was probably a lot lower than what you see there. And the birdie average for like legit players on the Live Tour was also a lot higher than that 4.1 average. So I think with the relatively low winds, which I know we haven't showed the wind forecast for Live yet. So I'll just show you guys that right now. So we bring up the Greenbrier. That's where they're playing, by the way. Here's the HRRR model. It's pretty much the same as round one, like 7-8 miles an hour of sustained wind. Not much when it comes to the wind gust perspective. I think you're going to see even better scoring than what we had for round one. So the way that we could do this is on Underdog, we can find like an under on strokes that we like, and then mix it with a Live Golf prop. And then on Underdog, we can do the same thing except with strokes, right? We can go on Underdog, take an under on strokes, and take it with a Live Golf prop. And I think find a decent amount of value there. So it doesn't look like Underdog has the Live stuff up yet. So hopefully they post them at some point. Prize Picks is now, for some reason, not loading. It did this yesterday too. It's like the lines makers watch the live stream and go, oh, how can we fuck with Luke when he's live? Oh my God. Alrighty, I guess we can't take a look at that board, but yeah, there are some overs on birdies that would make sense that you could mix in with some Live Golf stuff. So all right, let's start with Underdog. We'll take a look at Prize Picks here in a minute when hopefully I can load the board. Where are we at? Let me know when I think about Underdog with Victor under strokes, Sam Burns over 4.5 birdies, and Rye over 4.5. So I would say, Michael, look at the Prize Picks lines. I don't know what they're at because I can't load the board right now. It's probably going to take me a minute before to let me load that here in the live stream. But I would assume that Rye is at 4. You might have to find some other guys at 4 that are even better birdie makers than those two. I'd prefer that than the 4.5. It's not like they can't go over 4.5 birdies, but when we have a site that has slightly softer pricing and that you can get that push equity on at 4 birdies, I would try and do that if you can. So I think the thing to do on Underdog, if you're going to take any props, is to probably take some unders on strokes. So just to give you like a comparison, let's see, the Hovland strokes is you already took, right? So I think that one probably makes a little bit of sense. So let's see, let's take a look at his projection first. So he's 68.5 and then at 4.5 birdies. Like I'd rather have the 68.5 strokes there. Sam Burns, let's look at that one. So he's also at 68.5 and then at 4.5 birdies. I guess the 1.1x multiplier would be kind of nice. So if that's why you're playing that, I guess I'm not completely opposed to it. And then you had Rye and then Fitzpatrick. The top 10 prop, I have little to no take on just because Underdog really taxes with the payouts. Normally the multipliers on those are much lower than what you'd get on like a sports book. But like, yeah, there's the Matt Fitzpatrick. It was Aaron Rye that you took, right? Aaron Rye. And Aaron Rye's at 68.5. I would rather have his 68.5 line than his birdie line, if I'm going to be honest on that one. And then who was the other one? It was Matty Fitz, right? Yeah. I would go with strokes on those. Prize Picks loads on the phone, but not loading on PC. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. It's like telling me to confirm I'm not a bot. And I'll show you. I did this yesterday and it just didn't work. Yeah. So all right, I was able to see the board there for a second, so I do know that there were some overs on birdies that made sense. The issue is I can't show you guys the Live Golf board. Now, I know what I'm looking at in Live Golf, so I'll just tell you guys here in a second, but it's annoying to say the least. Do I ever lean towards 2 players in a round over 3 rounds in a player like Hubbard? I don't really know what you're saying. Do I ever lean towards 2 players in a round over 3 players in a round? I don't really know what you're asking, Ziggy. That's maybe if you rephrase it, I'll be able to give you an answer, but I'm not really sure what you're asking there. Alrighty. Let's go through pick 6. I'm hoping that we can load this Prize Picks board. What I was going to say about Prize Picks, though, is that there's some overs on birdies that I like. So though the average was only 4.1 birdies for round 1, I think in reality it was probably closer to like 4.2, 4.3. Their Saturday is their moving day over there, so you'll probably get some easier pins. And they have some legit players at 4.5 birdies. So just like I think some overs on birdies for the PGA might make sense. For guys that you can find it for. I saw some elite tier birdie makers on there before. You can mix them in with a few guys at 4.5 for the Live side. And there's some of your top birdie makers on the tour over there. So I don't want to give anything away because if I mention it, here's the issue, guys. I know the lines makers watch my shit. So if I mention it, they're going to bump it before I can play it myself. So as much as I want to help you guys out, if I say it, no one's going to get to enter it, right? Because we can't get the site to load. It's going to be an absolute pain in the ass. So let's just do Underdog to start, and then we'll try and look at that here in a second, I guess. So there's not really like an AM versus PM lean that we can go with out here for tomorrow. It's more so just trying to find projections that are value. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to bring up DraftKings. I also want to bring up FanDuel so that we can do some line comparison. And at 68.5, I'm assuming that we're going to find some guys that are values towards the under. So we're going to try and find some like minus 140s, maybe some like minus 150s that we can take in terms of sportsbook odds. And we'll do that to find our slip over here in Underdog. So I tend to agree with that, right? Moving day pins, relatively similar wind conditions. I don't think you're going to see that much change about this course. So let's see what we can find with these sportsbook odds. So Russell Henley is minus 150 under. He's chalky for DFS, but I'll still play him for props. He's also at 68.5 strokes. So let's see what else we got on here. We're just looking for minus 150s. I'm pretty much ignoring the projections, just looking at the juice right now. So Sanjay's minus 145. I do like him. What is Xander's projection? Is Xander at 68.5, 67.5? So no, he was bumped down 0.5. Okay. Let's look at these other ones. Hovland is minus 150. Denny McCarthy is minus 150, but he's 69.5. Hideki is minus 160 odds. Oh. But he is bumped down already. Okay, so they were ahead of us out there on that one. But let's see what else we got on here. So let's take a look at the odds a little bit closer now. So not just the juice. I was trying to go through those rather quickly on there. I guess we could go Hovland, right? You can take two minus 150s. Like that's a pretty decent amount of sportsbook line value. I've got to say Hovland has been very inconsistent. So I'm a little hesitant to want to play him there. Let me see if we have a Finau line to compare to. It does look like this slate has more to compare to on here. So, and first off, let me see what they have Henley at. Is he minus 140? So yeah, he's minus 140 towards the under on there. Tony Finau is low-key one of the guys I think is going to have a good day tomorrow. He's kind of been a sleeping giant. It's not like he's played particularly well so far, but he's gained with the putter. He's gained with the iron so far. Just kind of doing what you'd hope to see from Tony Finau. Just have a slightly better irons round, and I think he could have a really solid performance. So they could go with that. Let me see where they have Cantlay. I guess if they have a Cantlay line. So Cantlay is at 67.5. Now, he is juiced a little bit towards the over, but you'd have to think that one's probably decent value. Okay, let's look at the shots gained metrics to try and choose between these. So Russell Henley gaining on approach, solid course fit. I have no problems there. Tony Finau gaining a little bit on approach, gaining a little bit with the putter. The off the tee play is a little worrisome, but let's see what we've got with Cantlay now. And the Cantlay's shots gained metrics are pretty dog shit. So yeah, maybe we went with the right two there right off the bat. Who else could we mix in? A Sanjay. You guys know I like him for tomorrow, so I don't think that's the worst lean. All right, we're going to go with these two for the slip for the stream out here. So it's going to be this Russell Henley under, also this Tony Finau under, both playing pretty sustainable golf and are decent values compared to the sportsbook lines. Minus 150 juice on Henley on DraftKings. Finau didn't have a line over there on DraftKings, but is minus 140 for the under over here on FanDuel, which is solid for a plus EV lean. And I tend to agree with that, right? I don't always play the plus EV leans out here for golf, as the sports books tend to get stuff wrong all the time, but that's what I'm going with. Oh, you're saying in three sums, but they're in two sums? Yeah, I don't think it's going to change much. And you're saying like you do have Homa and Nap that are in two sums. Yeah, I don't think it impacts my process that much. So I do see what you're saying now. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I wouldn't let it impact your process. A lot of that's just mental, psychological stuff that's hard to quantify. And I'm not that good at doing so. So I try to avoid that. I just don't know what to do with it myself. But if you have a lean on it, like maybe you think certain guys play better in two sums than others, I'm not going to tell you what to do, right? Especially if you have more knowledge on that than I do. But personally, not something that I can do. Finau is 1.1 juiced under on the birdies on Underdog. But he's at 4.5 though, right, Mark? So shooting -2 and making 5 birdies is a completely different thing. So it's tempting. I see what you're saying there, Mark, but I'm going to say the birdie average, I think, is going to be pretty close to like 4 to maybe 4.25 per round. So somebody like a Tony Finau that makes slightly more birdies than your PGA Tour average, is somebody I'd put pretty much right at 4.5 birdies. So the fact that you're getting a slightly higher payout, like maybe makes it worth playing, but I would prefer the strokes line there out of those two. Let me see if I can get Prize Picks to load. Looks like it won't. Do I have to like stop sharing my screen or something to get this to load? Is it the live stream? Because if not, we might be shit out of luck. Actually, maybe I have to reload Prize Picks on a tab. Because yesterday I was able to get this work. It was doing the same thing, and we got it to actually load. Doesn't look like that's working. So maybe we'll go to pick 6. We'll dilly-dally there for a few minutes, and it'll fix itself. But yeah, this Prize Picks thing is mighty fine annoying. That's for damn sure. All right, let's go over here to pick 6. So for strokes, they at least have a slightly larger board, I guess, than what we had for the first day. But a few guys at 16.5, I guess you could take for unders. Like a JT, maybe not the worst play. Maybe even like a Sam Burns at 68.5 would be guys I'd be leaning on. In terms of overs on birdies, 4.5 for a lot of these players is, I think, a very fair projection. So I hate to say it, and this is honestly what we've said like the last 5 slates for pick 6, is these boards, when they don't give us enough options to choose from, are really tough to want to play. When they first came out with pick 6, they'd have a lot of like the mid to lower tier guys included. And now we're only getting like 7 to 8 strokes lines. We're getting 9 birdie or better lines out here for round 3. It's like they've taken a massive step back when it comes to their offering over here in pick 6. So I always say that your money can really dictate what they do with their product, right? If you're not going out there and you're giving exposure and playing right on this kind of app, then they're going to know that something's wrong and that they need to go out there and change something. So just out of principle, and based on the fact that I don't see like a ton of obvious value, like maybe a few leans for unders on strokes, I would probably stay away from pick 6. And if I had exposure or I had access to it myself, I don't down here in Florida. It's not something that Floridians can play. I wouldn't play it anyways, even if I could. Just this board, this kind of offering it's not worth getting exposure to, at least in my opinion. Let's see. Can we get Prize Picks to actually open? This is getting a bit ridiculous. If not, oh, look at that. If I click just the board and I don't sign in, and it does still sign me in there, we got it to load. So what I wanted to look at is I wanted to show you guys a few leans on here. So I was looking at this JT over on birdies before. He's got an elite tier course history. Also a guy that tends to make quite a few birdies. So him at 4 birdies, I think would make sense. Maybe even like a Keegan Bradley. But in terms of the live golf stuff, like DJ at 4.5, like there are some legit golfers here at 4.5 birdies that I'm very tempted to take for an over. So like a Louis, even like Sergio, like honestly, a lot of the guys towards the top of this 4.5, maybe even like the 5 guys here, like this Taylor Gooch, I don't think is a terrible over spot. This golf course is super easy. It's going to play easy with next to no wind tomorrow, especially after all that rain dropped today. I could see taking some overs on birdies. The rough is longer for the live golf course this year. It's worth noting that they did grow out the rough a little bit. Also, the greens, at least before the rain came through, were a little bit firmer than what they had last year. I think the rain changes that. It'll be just as soft as 2023 after they had like over an inch of rain that came through. But the rough is going to be a little bit longer. So I think you might see a few more bogeys for people that are getting out of position. But if you keep yourself in play and you hit a bunch of fairways out there, it's going to be essentially the same golf course that we had there in 2023. So that's why I like the overs on birdies. Birdie average last year, if you guys didn't tune in out there for the main slate stream, was, or I guess yesterday's round 2 stream is when we talked about that, but it was 4.66 per round. So that's why I think some of the guys at 4.5 would make sense for some overs. So that's what we're going to do for the live stream. I've got to hop on out of here. Like I said, I've got some stuff to do with some buddies tonight. So best of luck out there with some of your exposure tomorrow. And hopefully we can run it back out there for Sunday as well. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well. And make sure to check out the Patreon page for all the exposure that I'm getting to. On there, of course, the DFS tier is where you can download the spreadsheet that you saw with all my fantasy content. And then for all the different prop exposure that I'm getting to, we've also got the golf prop tier. So if you're playing Underdog, you're playing Prize Picks, you want to see what I actually enter myself, you can go over there and check out all that kind of exposure. Round 2 was really solid out there for DFS and for props. So hopefully we can build on that momentum throughout the weekend. I appreciate the support here as per usual, guys. Best of luck out there with everything that you're doing yourself. And may you have a fantastic Friday.